welcome to Past, Present, and Future, or Three Questions, the podcast where we learn about people's career journeys, how they got to where they are today, and where they'd like to go to next. I'm Parrots Cohen, a technologist and a wordsmith, and in my time in industry, I've been fortunate to work with both large companies and small startups alongside a number of very talented and hardworking individuals. This podcast is some of my conversations with them, where we learn about their journeys and what motivates them. If you'd like to be in the podcast, please feel free to reach out. You don't have to have a certain level of seniority or a number of years of experience. We all have something to share and learn from each other. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast or get involved in the collaboration, we'd also like to hear from you. All right, looking forward to our journey together as we learn more about each other and enrich ourselves in the process.
Record. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm extremely grateful to have the incredible Mark on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thanks. I'm super happy to be here.
All right, let's dive in. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about the beginning of your career and the beginning of your journey.
Sure. So I have a computer science background. I spent time in undergrad on that. Shortly after college, I was debating whether or not to do graduate work, and I really had trouble sort of making the decision there. I had an advisor who was kind of nudging me to doing a PhD, and I wasn't sure that was the right path for me, but it also was really intriguing. And what I ended up doing was I ended up getting a job at a research lab full-time at the University of Pennsylvania that was doing human behavior modeling and simulation. And my sort of premise there was like, well, I can figure this out while I work there. And I ended up getting a lot of really great experience. It was a ton of work. I ended up working on a DARPA project, which was a good chunk of my 20s, sort of getting that thing out the door. And, we focused on modeling how different factors that affect decision making. So like if I'm tired, it's hard to make a decision. If I'm well rested, I'm better at it. That's sort of we had thousands of different factors of these. Building simulations that sort of predict how people will react in different situations. And that's sort of, I spent about 6 years, I think, there before I dove into industry. And at that point, I had this itch. I wanted to do something. I'm not sure how well I understood what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something different. And I moved to New York to work in finance, and I just wasn't for me. I figured that out very, very quickly. And but in New York, exposed me to all these startups. And that's really where I found myself, and that's really what I fell in love with, was this like, we don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to figure it out. It was something that just wildly appealed for me, and I realized like that's it. I had found my home.
It's incredible. And yeah, I think to that point, I think as much as part of kind of our career journey is discovering about what we do want, I think having experiences where we have that clarity of what isn't for us, whether it's discipline or domain, is all part of kind of the journey of steering us towards where we can have our greatest impact. Yeah, so now we're in the present. Yeah, I think it would be great to share a little bit about kind of your current endeavors, your current ventures. It's definitely fascinating. Definitely encourage everyone to go check out your site. But yeah.
So currently I'm a fractional VP of engineering. So I work with early stage startups anywhere from pre-seed to Series B, who have a strong technical founder, who is great at execution and great at building product, but maybe has less experience with leadership generally, sort of how to organize and run a team. I partner with them to help run the team. I usually coach them as well so they can get better at that. And I'm sort of a stopgap along the way towards most companies who work with me. They're sort of on the verge of raising an A round or a B round, and at which point they're going to hire someone full time. But they're looking for someone, they have the kind of problems that a VP of engineering would solve, but it's not the right time yet for them to make that hire. Also find some folks who maybe this is a weird market at the time we're in, and some folks who are looking and are having trouble finding someone, and they don't want to wait. it could be 6 months till you make a hire, and it could be 6 months till they're having impact on the team. Sort of, I can show up next week and start having impact on your team, and sort of that's a gap that I fill in my role.
So a bit of a hybrid question here. I think like in terms of that work, in terms of both, what do you see as kind of the upside of that opportunity, being able to help kind of various companies, or maybe even kind of a little bit of sometimes at times a downside of that aspect? And then projecting into the future, where would you like to take this? How do you envision this kind of growing in 5 to 10 years down the road?
Yeah. The pros are sort of, I have a limited attention span. I like to dive into and bite on a really, really hard problem and work on it for 3 to 6 to 9 months and just like give it my all. And then once we get to like cruising altitude, I tend to lose interest, or at the very least, I tend to lose motivation. I find like I always care about the people I'm working with. I always care about the problem they're trying to solve. But like once everything's kind of stabilized, I'm just not quite as in it anymore. And so something in terms of finding what works for you, this is something I've found for me is like having a steady stream of like new problems to deal with, new people to learn, to meet and learn about and help them with their problems, is something I find really wildly fulfilling. And it's, I had a mentor about a decade ago who had a bunch of really hard questions for me when I first started working with him, and one of them was, what was your ideal job? And I told him at the time, I was like, I wish I could just work for a new startup every 6 months. And he kind of laughed and said, like, that's not a thing. And I found a way to make it my thing. And I found a way to build a business around sort of the working environment that I knew I always wanted. And that has been wildly fulfilling. Um, you did ask about downsides. There are downsides. Unlike a traditional job, I am self-employed. I have to find new clients. It's not just the work of running a team or sort of coaching a technical leader. It's also like I have to put myself out there. I have to constantly be networking. I have to constantly be posting. In I think like sales and marketing, people underestimate how much of your time is spent on that. I may have periods where I only work, quote, work 15 hours in a given week. And people are like, oh, you only work 15 hours? No, I put in a 40-hour week. It's just I only build for 15 hours. And I will be honest, I'm not inspired by writing copy for LinkedIn. I'm not like fulfilled by that. But doing it gets me two things. One, it gets me this work structure that really works for me. And it also gets me a job that's really flexible, that like I can just take a Thursday off and just, go skiing. That's sort of one of my big hobbies, and just be on the mountain when no one's around. I can choose to do that. And I have to balance like all that time I should be spending doing sales and marketing, but I can just do that in a way I can't with a full-time job. And it also gets me to work. It gets me to work the way I want. It gets me to work with the people I need. It gets me these new experiences on a regular basis. And there's one other downside I'll sort of touch on is being fractional. And this is a very, very, very specific thing that I think won't bother many people. But being fractional, you're always a degree detached. And so it can be a little lonely at times, despite the fact that like I'm not coding anything. I'm not building product. I'm helping people who are. And so most of my work with people is sort of one-on-one conversations, running on meetings. I'm engaging with people all the time. But at the same time, I'm a level removed. And it's not the same as like when you're embedded with a team for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so that can be, I think for some people, they're surprised at how that this can feel lonely, but it can at times. In terms of, you had asked about sort of looking at the future, and I'm going to point to sort of, I like the structure of what I'm doing. I'm not really looking to change that. But there is sort of one sort of change that I see coming on the horizon. For a long time, most of my work has been with what I'll call traditional machine learning companies, AI companies, where um, you know it's a minimum required that at least one of the founders has a PhD, if not all of them, and several of the first hires. That it's very difficult to build a model to accomplish a task, and that is what was valuable about the startup. With recent advances in the last 2 to 3 years, I think that's been inverted. And I think AI is getting democratized. And so we're looking at a shift from where AI startups are built by AI experts who have to go learn an industry vertical. And I think we're moving towards an area where subject matter experts, industry experts, are going to learn AI and they're going to build the next generational companies because you don't need that sort of machine learning domain knowledge to actually make it happen. And so the thing I'm really excited about is um, partnering with founders who look different than my previous clients, because my previous clients were all very, very technical. Then they were learning a new domain, and I'm really excited about sort of inverting that. Um, the clients I've worked with, shaped like this, they care about their customers so much because they've lived and breathed that domain for years. And I find that like that passion to be infectious. And I get really excited. And I find when I work with clients like this, I get very excited. And so that's what I'm looking forward to in terms of like looking at the future.
That's incredible. And I think that's for me kind of a kind of one like main note that comes up really isn't kind of within that thing like as you find what works for you, as you find within a kind of within those inherent trade-offs. And in order to a lot of times, I think in general, I mean like in tech overall, a lot of disciplines, a lot of kind of roles aren't necessarily ones that are kind of the cookie cutter roles that you originally find. There is a lot of kind of hybrid of disciplines. So whether kind of you're on the end of the spectrum, you're creating your own business, you're creating your own startup, or even kind of you're creating your own role within a corporate entity and you're kind of
Mhm.
negotiating and putting those pieces together, you both have that ability to craft something for yourself that brings more meaning and fulfillment. But also at times there can be a trade-off because you're drifting away from structure. And there's that kind of that inherent tension
Mhm.
between
Mhm.
the comfort and familiarity and fulfillment of structure and the comfort and kind of being kind of standing at the edge of your ship, kind of seeing where the kind of horizon takes you. And I think is in life and especially in careers, it's definitely an inherent kind of push and pull.
Yeah, and I think there is very much a spectrum. Of one end, we have structure and comfort, and to some extent, safety in more of a like I sense I'm safe as opposed to like I am in danger. And at the other end is like risk, um, fulfillment, because the structure is what it is. In some corporate environments, you will have a chances to be able to sort of craft your own role, but it's going to be limited, and it's going to be you are always going to be shackled to what the environment needs. And so to get that fulfillment, I think there is a degree of casting that structure aside, even if you're doing it within an existing organization. And so I think of this like continuum, and I think everyone sort of has a spot that they find themselves in. And it can be really valuable to think, well, where do I want to be on that continuum? And that goes for everyone. I know some people who just can't fit in anywhere, who would really benefit from saying, I'm just going to cast myself into um, this company and I'm going to let what happens happens. I work with founders, and the we don't really like to talk about it, but 90% of startups fail. And a lot of times when they fail, there's an acquisition in place. And now a founder is finding themselves with a full-time job, perhaps at a very, very established company. And it is not uncommon for me to give the advice of just sit back and let it happen. You've been working on your startup for 5 years. Like maybe you could benefit from someone else's structure. And so I think about that continuum, and I don't think there's a right or wrong place to be. I do think we all have a natural tendency where we fall. And we could all benefit potentially from saying, yeah, maybe I should be somewhere else on that continuum, or maybe I should take a risk. Because risk doesn't just mean like start my own business. Risk could mean not starting your own business. Risk could mean going where someone else has more say than you. It depends on where you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah, for me, like it kind of boils down to that kind of idea of like sometimes action is inaction. It's there's definitely a lot of different kind of levers and a lot of different directions. Yeah, overall, this is a fascinating, very value-rich conversation. If you'd like to work with Mark, we'll have a link to connect with him in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today.
Of course, I really appreciate you being here. I'm very happy to get a chance to share a little bit about what my career journey has been like, and I hope other people find that useful, inspirational, and if not, entertaining.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.